So what's a strategy? A strategy is an integrated set of choices that positions you on a playing field of your choice in a way that you win. So there's a theory. Strategy has a theory. Here's why we should be on this playing field, not this other one. And here's how, on that playing field, we're going to be better than anybody else at serving the customers on that playing field. That theory has to be coherent. It has to be doable. You have to be able to translate that into actions for it to be a great strategy.
So what he's talking about right there, most people miss it. They hear the word strategy and they think it's just a fancier version of planning, and it isn't. Strategy starts with choosing the battlefield. It's deciding where the game is even played and why that specific field gives you the highest odds of winning. Most people don't do that. They're busy, they're active, they're checking boxes. They focus on the transaction, the seller, buyer, money, product. Done. They reduce the whole thing into a single moment. Hey, what's going on, loungers? Welcome back to The Supply Chain, the only show on YouTube helping resellers get into replenishables. If you're new here, my name is Mason T, and I am a 20-plus year importer and product developer. So today, I'd like to direct your attention over to a particular chart that I have found online, and I will leave a link in the description below. Previously, I have made infographics depicting that Amazon has 10 times more sales traffic than eBay. Now, in the past, your average reseller couldn't get into this space due to sourcing limitations, but this show is here to help you change all of that. So when we look at exactly what is happening in this chart, it shows you that the e-commerce market and who has the largest share of everything. Now, when I hover over Amazon, it's going to show you 37.8%, with Walmart at second place at 6.3%. That's already a whopping huge difference. And then Apple is basically its own private website selling, their AirPods and iMacs and other iPads and stuff like that. Now, eBay is at 3.5% here. So when you see 3.5 versus 37.8%, I know it looks very, if you can't beat them, join them kind of situation. But the thing is, this is what I mean about having the wind at your backs. But we're not talking about a 60-40, 70-30 kind of difference. We're talking about a greater than 10-to-1 difference here. In life, as in anywhere else, it is far better as a young person to get your butt over to New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, in order to try to make your money, as opposed to be in the middle of nowhere. And the same thing would apply to anywhere else in the world. If you're in China, you definitely want to be somewhere with Shanghai or Beijing. If you're in the Middle East, then you really want to get your butt over to Dubai. So when we come here and then we look at this chart, it's really eye-opening, and just to let that sink in about choosing our battlefields, right? So this is why I highly implore everyone that if I'm going to empower resellers and uplift them to a better place, we need to start by choosing a better battleground space. It is going to be far better to be mediocre at some place like Amazon than to be killing it on eBay. So if I go ahead and scroll up a little bit over here, and then I show you exactly the active sellers of 2007 to 2024. You can see starting from 2010, it's starting to increase here. But then once we get into, the COVID area of this time, 2019 to 2020, now the platform is on a steady decline. And you know what happens when the sellers leave? When the sellers leave, the users leave as well. So there was on a steady incline from 2010 up until around 2018, 2019 here. And now we are on a steady decline again. So granted, I know that there's a lot of people who might be loyal to eBay, but I apologize. I don't know how to fix reselling. This is not what I do. What I do is I help people become better business owners. To me, the business is the vessel. It's not supposed to be hey, how can we fix reselling or make our business into better reselling or how to become better resellers. Rather, it is about how to level up our business and become better businessmen, because ultimately we all register the exact same LLC, sole proprietorship, S Corp, you name it, type of letters of incorporation. So why isn't the business the vessel rather than trying to level up the main activity of just reselling? You see, most people think that doing business means you sold something, I bought something, therefore transaction, our business complete. But that kind of mindset is actually so bare bones that it might as well be a cave painting. See, the transaction part is definitely real, sure, but it's the least important part of the whole engine. Anyone can tweak an SOP. Anyone can polish steps 3, 4, 5 once the machine is already running. That's not business. That's refinement through maintenance. Business is the ignition. It's the spark. It's whether you could take a raw idea that's unproven and figure out how to drag it into reality without setting yourself on fire. It's not can you execute a process? It's can you start something out of nothing? And most people can't. They mistake polishing for creating. So the skill, the business is whether you know how to test the idea in the cheapest, simplest, fastest possible way. Here's a clip of the founding CEO of Netflix explaining just that.
You know, they've built this incredibly ornate business in their head, all based on this feeling that this must be a good idea. And you've got to nip that in the bud. And the way you nip it in the bud is you try, rather than dreaming how amazing this idea is, the first thing you think about, the only thing you think about is how can I quickly, cheaply, and easily collide this idea with a real person and find out, is it in fact a good idea or a bad idea? How can I do some kind of hack that will allow me to quickly find out whether customers actually would want this or not? And almost always you build this quick, cheap, down and dirty, I don't mean minimal viable product. I mean unviable. Something you can quickly do, like turn the car around and mail a CD to yourself just to find out the basic premise of can I actually use the US mail to send movies back and forth? Because if that had failed, well, great, on to the next one. And that's such a critical step. That's the framework that everyone has to have. It is not about having a good idea. Having ideas is easy and trivial. The important thing is how clever can you be to come up with a quick and cheap and easy way to test it.
And that's exactly right, because there's no point in polishing an offer that nobody wants. There's no value in being efficient at delivering something irrelevant. Business is about figuring out relevance before you figure out scale. So the argument becomes clear. Doing business isn't the offer. Doing business is offering what matters. And once you've established that for the lowest amount of resources possible, you slide right into sourcing, which is the next logical step. And with that being said, let's start today's sourcing lesson. All right, guys, so before we begin today's sourcing lesson, I want to make clear that it is not lost on me that since the last time I have done the sourcing lessons, the Jungle Scout has changed a little bit in the Chrome extension, okay? Now, keep in mind that I said that what you want is the Keepa extension as well as the Jungle Scout extension. I'm not telling anybody to get the full program. That costs money. It's about like $50 a month in order to get that. The extension is absolutely free. Now, the extension for the rest of you guys is about 50 free searches before you have to start paying for it. However, all you have to do is just get yourself another email. So I will always find ways to try to keep all of these activities free. Now, here's the problem with the Chrome extension currently. You can see over here, something is completely missing, which is the monthly sold, the daily sold, as well as the revenue. And that is very, very important for us. So when we click on columns here, you can see that there's 15 columns and there's supposed to be 18 columns. I don't know what the issue is. And when we go over to Jungle Scout itself, it tells you that this happens every now and then. There is no official wording whatsoever however, saying that they changed it officially. So I couldn't find any updates with that whatsoever. However, this is not going to hinder us at all. As I said before, we are entrepreneurs, we are go-getters, and we are problem solvers at the same time. So I did come up with a workaround solution, which is we're going to switch over to Firefox. So Firefox is the only other browser that also has the Jungle Scout extension or Keepa extension for the browsers. If you're using things like Opera or Edge, there's just no extensions for those type of browsers. So get yourself onto Mozilla Firefox, download Firefox, and then from there, specifically search for the Jungle Scout extension as well as the Keepa extension. You can see that I have it in the top right over here. And then when we come back to doing a quick search for this, and then when I click the Jungle Scout extension either here or down here to do a scan search results, you can see that the monthly units sold, daily units sold, monthly revenue is here again. And then when I click on the columns, we can see that there are 18 columns once again. So all the information for us to continue doing the Jungle Scout type searches are still here over at the Firefox version. Now, will things get corrected on Chrome? Maybe there is some kind of a update with the current version of Chrome. I don't know. I can't tell you that for sure. How long will this hold up the way it is? I don't know. I can't tell you for sure. But in the meantime, for this episode, this is absolutely what the workaround is, as well as if it doesn't change for Chrome, then we'll just be using this for future reference, okay? So keep in mind, use the Firefox stuff, and now let's start today's lesson. All right, so for this week's cookie cutter example that anybody could just steal and copy, it's going to be the foot ankle massager. Now, why did I choose this item? I like it. I like it a lot, actually, because it addresses a literal actual pain point. When you have pain, when you're feeling sick, that's all your mind, and you will pay any money in order to get rid of it, especially when you think about items like this where people are going to have ongoing long-term use, because even every single time they cure their ailments temporarily, you don't know when it's going to come back. So they're definitely going to hold on to this item. So I definitely foresee this item, as long as it does their purpose and you have communicated this clearly, it's very likely that the return rate of this thing would be very low, unless there's something else that's wrong with it. And we're going to get into that in a second. So basically, as you scroll down here, there's all sorts of other types of ankle massagers and stuff. I like the ones that does more than just warm the ankle, right? It wraps around their ankle and it massages and it heats like at the same time. So when I go ahead and do a Jungle Scout search over here, I've already whittled out all the ones that is actually, for the full leg, or it's kind of like a foot bath type of, you put two feet into it at the same time, or some of the pads that looks like a Roomba. There's all sorts of other things that I whittled out, and I still ended up with a medium demand and low competition. So we got a solid 7 here. So as always, I recommend the 7 for people who are just getting into a niche. Now, if you already in this niche and you have some kind of tweak, some kind of change, you know how to work it in this particular area, then you could go with a 6. Like, you have a little bit more expertise of knowing what you're doing as far as tweaking an item. But if you're just getting into stuff, definitely stay with the 7 and up. So I want to show you guys, I have this all sorted out already by monthly units sold. And the number one listing that I have over here is actually number 2 in the foot ankle massagers, which is this one. Now, this is Rejubicare, and even though they are an American brand, this is clearly a white label of something else. So they pretty much just slap their logo on top of this thing. Now, as always, you guys know that Pegasus will never recommend that you guys just go ahead and jump into the number 2, number 1, because it's just unrealistic. But there's something that caught my attention with this particular one, which is, how come this thing has a 3.2 star rating? So, in the past, I've talked about my framework as far as doing research when we are deep diving the lenses of scrutiny, right? Which is the buyer, the seller, the buyer, the reviewer, and the scholar. So for the first 2 that you want to deep dive is basically what the feedbacks are saying, what other customers' feedbacks are, and if there are any issues here that hasn't been addressed. And definitely, I recommend people always jump into the 2-star and the 3-star, because sometimes, usually, the 1-star stuff are people who are just really angry, and then they say a lot of incoherent or disconnected things, or they just want to say something malicious. But when it's the 2-star and the 3-star, especially when it's, either very direct or a long paragraph of stuff, it's really worth reading. So when I just jump into the 2-star one, and then we see what people are saying, lacking instructions. This one, the foot is not the right size. It's one size fits all, but it's a little too short for me. So people are actually comparing the size and saying it's not right. Now, when we go over the 3-star here, it says too small, very small, needs to fit better, etc., etc. So as I dive this thing, I noticed that, okay, people are complaining about the size of this. Now, when I come back and then look through the rest of the ankle monitor type, ankle massagers, foot massagers, I've noticed that nobody is addressing this issue. So now, right out of the gate, I could go ahead and try to find this thing on Alibaba and either offer 2 sizes or offer a size larger, which is, addressing a pain point that nobody else is taking care of. So when I jump on the Alibaba over here, I find that this item is somewhere around $10 for one of these ankle massagers, because this one is a slightly longer one. Now, when we do the Jungle Scout search here, as always, I like to scroll down a little bit to somewhere around the 300 area. So I found this one, which is this AF Deal version of the foot massager, and it's going for $39.99, and it's selling 343 units every single month. So when we click on this one, I like this because it's selling a reasonable amount of units, and it's only ranked 137 in the electric foot massagers. This meets a lot of my own personal criteria. Now, as I showed, I found this one already at $9.80 because this one's a little bit longer. I also like this one because it has multi-uses. Look, they flipped it around the other direction so that you could fit the foot a little bit longer. And then they have it over here for the regular use of the ankle, as well as the calf, as well as a bicep over here. So I really like that. Perhaps we could take this item and reposition it for other body parts so that you could have 4 different listings, for the calf, for the bicep, and then see what ends up selling. So I think it's amazing when you have an item that's a single SKU that you can list in many different ways in order to generate more sales every single month. So that is a really nifty thing to keep in mind. Now, let's come back to this particular item and talk about a little more. Here, there is a button for View More. And then when I click on this, there is a View Profit Calculator here. As always, we see the opportunity is a 7, but we also have to make sure that there's still room for margins here. So when I click on this, it'll take me to an area where I could just go ahead and add the product cost as well as the shipping cost. Now, as far as the product cost, we saw that this thing on Alibaba is roughly around like $10. So from there, I want to add a little shipping to it just off the top of my head and highball it a little bit. So I'm just going to put at $12. At $12, this still leaves me with a net profit of 13.38. Which is return 111. So 111 means that I get $1.11 on the dollar of every single dollar that I risk into this particular item. Not bad, because with the net profit that I have here, I could sacrifice a lot of this right in the beginning into a lower price, as well as a lot into my PPC ad campaign, because I want to be in a good position. See, items that are around, 1,000 to 3,000 rating, they only sell like 30 or less every single month. That's a big problem. Now, if you're willing to go ahead and then put that money into growth, like you sacrifice your margins for the first, 30 to 90 days in the beginning. And once you have a good ranking that's in the high 2 digits, 70, 80, 90, something like that, you could be moving anywhere between 300 to 500 units every single month for the next, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And this is why the payoff is so good, that once you have a good product market fit, but you got to be willing to accept the jail time first. So for this particular item, we could see that there's good profit margin here. There's good opportunity. And you don't really need to have a really, really low BSR rating to get reasonable sales. Another thing that I want to show you guys is that with the Keepa, this guy has been around for a whopping 37 days. So there are items, because you're in an area that has good opportunities, people aren't offering, it's just not congested, and people really need this item. So stuff can blow up very easily with just a little bit of guidance. So I really like how within, the 37 days over here, they are already at 343 units sold. So if you ask me, hey, Peg, how long does it take before my item could fly, et cetera, et cetera, it's all a case-by-case basis, right? So ultimately, you still have to book a consultation. I have to look at your item. We have to work on it together, and then you have to come back, and then, we'll see how you're doing again before I could give you a proper assessment of what's actually going on. But again, case-by-case basis, this is an outlier where it's doing very well very, very quickly. But it's not as rare as you think it is. It's all about, did we do the proper research to put ourselves in the correct battlefield? And this is exactly what ties back into today's lesson. Being in the right marketplace is picking the right battlefield. And when you're wondering about a certain niche, is it good or is it bad, you can always say no and then pick a different niche that is, a 7, an 8, puts you into a better battlefield. And this is exactly what it is. So I think that the foot ankle massagers is a pretty good spot to be in. So for some of you out there that were wondering about the sold comps when it comes to eBay. See, here's the thing. I'm not too worried about all of this stuff, because ultimately Amazon is the final destination, right? I want to sell it a little bit on eBay, sell a little bit on Etsy, mainly because I'm looking for conversations. I just want the feedback. I want to read other people's feedbacks. I want to read feedbacks on Amazon already of what people are saying about this. I want to read feedbacks anywhere that I could find it, anywhere between like Reddit to, eBay, wherever I could find any kind of conversation whatsoever, and take it all with a grain of salt. Try to tally things and get a good survey of the land of what people are saying about this particular item and what possible room for improvement there is. But a lot of times when it comes to eBay, see, eBay is the smaller marketplace, right? And things are run a little bit differently there. But last week we were talking about like the balaclavas, right? So I went over here and I put in wool balaclava just because I wanted to shrink down the category a little bit, because if you just put regular balaclava, there's like 87,000 results or whatever, and it's just too crazy, right? And then you can see that this one says 248 results for when I click in the sold comps for this. Now, we see eBay very differently. When I look back from where I am on eBay and I see what resellers are talking about when it comes to eBay, I see a very myopic approach, because when you look for the topic of eBay on YouTube, it's basically just on reselling. So it's just resellers talking to resellers, teaching resellers a reseller opinion, right? Now, this is what actually happens that I wanted to show you guys that might be a little bit eye-opening for you all. So you see this particular balaclava here that's going for $8.99, and then it's sold again over here. But here's the thing, they're not the same listing. So originally you might think to yourself that, oh, okay, so this item sold many times, et cetera, et cetera. But no, that's not exactly how it works. When you click on this one, and then you click on this one, so I'll open both. The first one here is being sold by HTH20. And then the second one over here is sold by Case Dazzle. So when I hover over here, right, and then this one, and I hover over here with the stock images, you can see that it is the same balaclava. But this one has sold 32 times, and the other one has sold 191 times. What does that tell you? It tells you that when you do the sold comp stuff, it just gives you the last time it was sold. It doesn't actually give you how many was sold between sellers who have multiple quantities, who have endless quantities, who have replenishable quantities. So when we do the sold comp method between, Levi's 501 jeans and stuff like that, it's basically a sold comp method between resellers within resellers of singular items. You see what I'm saying? Each singular item that shows up, it doesn't give you the multiple quantity that's searched, making sold comps very, very inaccurate if it's all mixed in together. That's what makes it so hard to, rely on sold comps. Some people swear by it. Some people say they don't really work. Some people say it's hit or miss, but that is exactly the reason why. It's a very decoupled kind of calculation from itself. It's, what's sold in the past 90 days between listings that are multiple quantities and single quantities and some stuff that just simply doesn't belong there, but between, a whole bunch of strangers versus what's listing today by a whole bunch of strangers. How do you work with these kinds of numbers? They're all over the place. So of course people get analysis paralysis. Now, I just wanted to show you guys exactly what happens on the back end when you start searching stuff one by one. And plus, when you move over to things like Jungle Scout, where you could start hiding rows and trying to refine your search a little bit better, now you have a much more clearer picture of whether or not you should do an item. So ultimately, when you take a risk on stuff, as long as you have decent research on this, you should not be stuck with the item. At worst, the item is not moving at a rate that you would prefer, so maybe you would just phase this item out, get your money back, and then try again. That way, what we're actually doing here is far less risky than what people think it is.